When you think of an NES game with the word dragon in it, what's the first game that comes to mind? I bet that game's gonna be on this list today. How are you feeling? You got John Riggs here checking out the 15 games, what? 15 games that have the word dragon right in the title. And if you could do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. It's a huge favor to me, and it lets YouTube know to, keep up these kind of videos. So your subscription feed isn't full of a bunch of the same stuff that everyone else is doing. Although I do some of those videos too. We can start with the obvious. Don't need to spend a whole lot of time talking about them, but Dragon Warrior, now you might know this best as Dragon Quest. I know it best as Dragon Warrior. In fact, I still call it the Dragon Warrior series today, even though it hasn't been Dragon Warrior since, what, Dragon Warrior 7 on PS2? Something like that? I've always been more of a Final Fantasy guy than a Dragon Warrior guy, but, Dragon Warrior has the word dragon in it. But along with those two, we got several sequels along the way. Dragon Warrior 2, a lot of people really enjoyed this one. Even has a little prologue at the beginning, how fun. Dragon Warrior 3, I know several who find this as their favorite NES Dragon Warrior. Very cool on the front there. And although this looks like Final Fantasy, and it could be Final Fantasy, it is also Dragon Warrior. This is Dragon Warrior 4. Dragon Warrior 4, another favorite by many. Yeah, NES had 4 Dragon Warrior games. We only had 1 Final Fantasy game, at least here in the US. So they're doing something right. Shout out to Dragon Warrior. Alright, we gotta talk about Dragon Fighter. It's one of my absolute favorite NES games. Definitely a hidden gem. Hard to find, a little bit pricey, but man, I love this game. Super difficult too. It was only like 5 or 6 stages, but man, is it a hard game. It's the kind of Nintendo game you're looking for too. Great graphics for NES. The music is fantastic. Got the moving sprites and all that too. You're some dude who kind of looks like, talk about Final Fantasy, looks a little bit like Kane the Dragoon from Final Fantasy IV there, slashing your sword and all that. But the cool thing is, with Dragon Buster, is you can transform into a dragon. Once you get your little dragon meter filled up, you can actually transform into a dragon whenever you want. The meter will dissipate, which will cause it so you have to, build up your meter again and everything. But that's going to be a huge help for you in this game as you make your way again through not very many stages. Super difficult, fantastic game. Game even has bosses. Love the little kind of simulated northern lights in the background there. Dragon Buster! I love this game. Dragon Spirit is a game that you have probably played. Dragon Spirit. They had this for a few different consoles, the arcade, TurboGrafx 16. The NES port is actually very good, and nicely done too. If you're looking at like collecting games and all that, Dragon Spirit doesn't go for a lot of money. I don't know if it's like a $10 game, $15 game, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. But as you play this game, when you first pop it in, you're just like, oh, this is pretty cool. You get all these upgrades and everything, you're doing really well. You find the final boss like almost immediately in this game. Not a very big first level here. And you're like, oh, that's it? No, that was the beginning. That was the prologue. That was the stage. That was like stage 0. Then it goes into the title screen. Then it goes into the opening cinematic. Then it goes into the first stage. So I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. You get to play the little opening storyline there. A few video games do this. A few games, not many, but I like it when you get a chance to kind of. It's almost like a tutorial in a little bit for NES games, which didn't exist back then. I do love me some Dragon Spirit. I'll play it right now. You can't stop me. And we're going to have to talk about Dragonslayer eventually. Dragonslayer, nothing like the arcade version. This is the NES version inspired by. I'll give it to this game. Excellent animation. I do love the animation in this game. But man, it is a difficult drudge to play this game for Dragonslayer. And even if you can get through the first little part there, then you're just, yeah. And I feel that this is how I feel when I stub my toe. There you go. Just no matter what the damage is, crumple into a pile of bones. There's something anyway. Funny enough, they did bring Dragonslayer out in Japan, and for some reason the Japanese version runs faster. This is the typical gameplay speed on Dragonslayer, the import version. I don't know why they sped it. I don't know why they slowed it down for the US version, but there you go. Maybe that was the US version. They sped it up for the Japanese version. I couldn't tell you. Dragon Power from Bandai here. It's one of those games that came out in Japan as an anime, but because American audiences weren't familiar with Dragon Ball at the time, that they just changed the name to Dragon Power. This is, don't get it twisted, this is Dragon Ball. But when you play the game, you look like this little monkey character. You're punching the guys and everything. You can see the little cutscene at the beginning. You got a few bosses you can, attack along the way too. Punch and kick and jump kick and stuff like that. Little cutscenes and all that. But yeah, you can also find this game in Japan as one of the Dragon Ball games, of which they had a few. But yeah, it's the same game, just a little bit of a reskin there. So interesting. They could have just left it the same. I don't think anyone would have cared, but whatever. Maybe there's a licensing issue. I don't know. Dragon Strike is another game on this list. AD&D Dragon Strike. And not as common of a game, but kind of a fun game, actually, for an AD&D game. You play as a dragon, and you're flying around here, a little bit like a Dragon Strike. No, not Dragon. This is Dragon Strike. Dragon Spirit that we saw earlier. But you have two different planes field here. You have like the like way up high, or then closer to the ground. You can kind of switch back and forth as needed. Doing little dogfights with other dragons. They're also attacking the people on the ground and their camps and everything. Super fun game. I like this. This didn't have to be an AD&D game. When I think of like Dungeons and Dragons style games, I think of more like dungeon crawlers, right? But Dragon Strike, it was a fun alternative. It's like, oh, cool. This is actually something I can kind of get into. And because they are called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, we can cover the other AD&D games pretty quickly here. We have Heroes of the Lance. In a recent video I did, I was like, man, this game's terrible. You can't even choose your own party. But apparently, Heroes of the Lance is based on this specific party. So, apologize about that. I'm clearly ignorant and I do zero research. I just go by my gaming nostalgia for playing these games growing up. And boy, these games are rough. I tried to play them. I promise you I did. I tried to get into them. Like, you don't just tap up to go through the door. You have to hold the button for like a second or two before you can change screens and everything. And then, hilariously enough, if you run into a battle and fight someone, then it switches to the next character, but then your dead body is still on the ground. I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that was interesting. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Pool of Radius. Now, this is the kind of game that I would think of a D&D game. Like, when I think of like a Dungeons & Dragons style game, this is exactly what I think. Kind of dungeon crawler. You can go into town and, get your stuff or whatever. You have to fight the enemies too. And when you do run into an enemy, then it turns into a little bit more of a strategy style game. So, for me, this is like the epitome of an AD&D game for the NES. It's not terrible. It's a little, it takes some time to get into and everything. I honestly, and admittedly, I didn't really do that with this game. But, but this is the kind of game I would want if I was looking for an AD&D game. Pool of Radius is this one. Or Pool of Radiance, sorry. Not Pool of Radius, Pool of Radiance. Geez, I keep saying Pool of Radius. What does that even mean? We also do have the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Hillsar is the name of this game. And Hillsar is, it's an okay D&D style game too. First, you have to ride your horse to get to where you're going, and you have to jump way over these things, or not. But then, for instance, you're in the town, and you can kind of walk through the town a little bit. It'll let you know, what's on your left side and right side, so you can, maybe go inside of a door, or maybe go inside of a stable, or maybe go inside an unlocked door to an abandoned house and kind of loot their treasures and stuff like that. Yeah. Alright, we got Castle of Dragons, and a pretty decent game. You move for a little bit, and then you fight an enemy for a little bit. Then you move a little bit more, then you fight an enemy for a little bit more. It's just kind of a, work your way through kind of thing. I'm not great at blocking in this game, so I'm just so much more of a try to jump out of their way, or just slash them until they die, and one of us is going to go first. That's how I play this game. You can get upgrades though, including better armor. You can throw different things. Your sword does different stuff. Castle of Dragon. It ain't bad. It was the perfect rental back in the day. And Dragon is in the title of these. We can talk about Double Dragon. Different from the arcade is the NES version, and this was not uncommon. A lot of Nintendo games did this for the time. I liked it, and I didn't like it at the same time. I understood that I was not going, like Bionic Commando, for instance, was different in the arcade than it was on the NES. Strider was different in the arcade than it was on the NES. And then when Double Dragon came out, I just kind of figured that. I was just like, okay, cool, this is going to be the NES version of their version of Double Dragon. Kind of like Disney taking the Jungle Book and re-changing everything about it, but still calling it the Jungle Book. Or, whatever. It's like they're going to do their own thing. But you have to fight these guys along the way. It works on more of an experience level up system, if that makes sense. You have to do the things, and eventually, the more you play this game, then the more hearts you get, and then the more moves you can do. I preferred this on the Sega Master System, which I also had at the time for a small while. I just wanted the arcade version of Double Dragon. The NES version, I did play it. Of course, I played it. Everyone played it back then. But again, this was Double Dragon. You could look at this game and say, yeah, this is definitely Double Dragon. Although, quick story too, I remember I played this game a lot at my local Red Robin in Yakima, Washington. And there was one time a much older guy came in. I mean, he was probably like late high school, early, college age, or something like that. And he started to be player 2, and for some reason he got in his head that I think he hit me accidentally, and I turned around and basically killed him in the game. And then it turned into a quarter muncher where him and I kept popping in quarters just to stay on the same part of the screen, but beat each other up. It was kind of like my first introduction to like a two-player beat-em-up versus system way before Street Fighter 2. And we both had a great time doing it. We were both laughing along, and here me, middle school age me, and then high school age him, whoever it was. I didn't even make eye contact with him. But what a great game. What a fun story. I forgot all about that story until just now. Double Dragon 2 came along. This was my personal favorite of the three of them. Until you learn that fighting style, the A and B buttons, one button attacks in front of you, one button attacks behind you. And it's kind of confusing at first. Renegade does that too. Kind of confusing at first, but you do get used to it, and it actually works to your advantage. Doesn't matter anyway, because you're just going to be doing that V trigger the whole time. When you jump, hitting both buttons, and as soon as you land, if you hit both buttons again at the same time, you do that shining knee right in their face. Get that V trigger everyone, and it's like a super stiff move, and you can pretty much go through the entire game just doing that. Now, if you're playing this game with a turbo controller, thinking it's going to do that, it's not, because the turbo controls on your NES Advantage don't quite match up, but the NES Max does. So it's like the only game worth playing with the NES Max. We also have Double Dragon 3. Oh, yeah. The first arcade game I ever saw with, with in-game purchases. You actually literally have to pop in quarters for power-ups. And along with that, it's not a great game. It looks like it would be, and it's not a terrible game, but such a steep decline between Double Dragon 2 to Double Dragon 3. I'm sure there's another game, and help me out in the comments if you can, on any other game where there is a game as good as the sequel, and then the third one in the series tanked. I mean, Wizards and Warriors a little bit, because Iron Sword was great, but then Wizards and Warriors 3 wasn't, because it was like two different companies or something, I don't know. And this may have been the same case too. Their own version of the game. I did like that you had other characters you could play as and everything. Well, whatever. I'm sure there are other Dragon games on the NES, and maybe there's one of them I didn't cover. Let me know in the comments, because I always end up missing one or two. But please recheck out some of these games, or maybe check out some of these games for the first time. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Unless it's Double Dragon 3, then you might be disappointed.